Buenas tardes, amigos. It's UFC. It's UFC Noche. And it's on this Saturday as Alexa Grasso and Valentina Shevchenko are in the main event in the women's flyweight division. And it's all about Mexico this week. A Mexican run card, Mexican Independence Day this weekend. UFC have taken up the T-Mobile Arena. That's what we're going to do. Look we're even getting so into the Mexican team. Harry has two extraterrestrials hidden under his desk that he's going to unveil to us at the end of this preview show as well, given the recent news of all of that nonsense that's going on today. Hilarious. But look about the event itself, Harry, or maybe the intro, whatever you want to call it. This Mexico teamed event. It's very refreshing. It's very refreshing for me to have this kind of unique event with a lot catered on the Mexican Independence Day. Obviously, a lot of Mexican athletes there. We had tastes of it here over in with UFC Paris and in other kind of areas as well, a UK market as well. But to not call this, UFC Vegas 70, 200 and a half, or just another fight night. It's nice to have these unique events. And having a title on free TV as well is only good, and it's going to showcase one of the richest divisions in the UFC right now, which is the women's 125-pound division. So as a whole, this event ticks off a lot of boxes for me. How about you?
I might open up a can of worms here, I'm afraid. I'm gonna probably start a debate. Firstly, I couldn't agree more. I love the idea of a Mexican-centered card. I understand why completely, but it is a real shame that we couldn't have this in Mexico, right? 100%. And I totally get it. That's not a problem for me whatsoever. Logistically, everything else, I completely understand, no problem whatsoever. And I am sure that, as always, the UFC will do a good job of making it feel like it is centered around the Mexican community and the Mexican fighters. They always do a fantastic job when they're looking to solidify a card for a specific type of geography or nationality. I agree also that, we've had a Singapore card recently, bunch of East Asian talent on that card. We had UFC Paris. We've had UFC London, where we've had all the European fighters. And I enjoy those cards, right? They always bring just a little wrinkle of something different. Even last week, we had the New Zealand or the Anzac community, right? Massive card for them. Okay, we might not have enjoyed it from a pay-per-view perspective when we had that conversation, but for them in that region, it's a gigantic card, right? Absolutely massive card. And I think this one speaks of exactly the same thing. And so I'm very happy for those fighters to be getting the recognition that they deserve. Obviously, Mexico is a country that has a litany of fighting history. The debate will start here, though. I have a problem with the title being on this card.
Really?
And I have a problem because I think it degrades and it almost disrespects the title. So
this is interesting. I think we're going to have to get into this before we talk about the fights, because look, it's not the first time that we've seen this happen. The UFC have put the heavyweight title, I believe, was on there at one stage when they opened up Fox. What's that?
I have a list.
Go ahead.
Okay, so I'm going to shout out Mr. Spencer Kite for doing the research for this on me. Thank you very much. I appreciate it. So there's been 24 occurrences in total in UFC history. 1 tape delayed pay-per-view, which was UFC 75, 9 UFC on Fox events, 4 tough finales, 5 Fight Night on ESPN shows, and 5 televised Fight Night shows. I apologize for looking away from the camera. I'm just reading off my notes here. 1 at heavyweight, which was Kane versus JDS on Fox. 1 at light heavyweight, which is Rampage versus Henderson. We then had 2 at flyweight, the tough 26 finale, and then Shevchenko, funnily enough, versus Liz Carmouche. 4 at bantamweight, Cruz versus DJ, Barral versus Michael McDonald for the interim belt, TJ versus Barral 2, and TJ versus Cruz. 4 at strawweight, Carla Esparza versus Rose in the tough 20 finale, JJ versus JJ being Ioanni and Jacek versus Pena for the Fight Night in Berlin on UFC Fight Pass, JJ versus Claudia Gadelha 2 on tough 23 finale, International Fight Week 2016, Andrade versus Zhang on ESPN Plus, and then we move into the eight flyweight fights. DJ versus Dodgen, DJ versus Moraga, DJ versus Joe B2, DJ versus Tim Elliott, DJ versus Wilson Hayes, Henry Cejudo versus TJ, Figgy versus Joe Benavidez 1, and Figgy versus Joe Benavidez 2. Now, if I could just add my personal element to this, and then I'll happily bring you in.
Sure.
My thoughts here are this. Kane versus JDS, there's some obvious context around that. Massive fight. They wanted to bring eyes in and all that. I understand. There is then an occurrence that seems to be symptomatic of the way that the UFC feels about certain titles. There are titles that are more important than other titles. The 155-pound belt, the 170 belt, the 185-pound belt for a time, and the 145-pound belt have long been very, very, very valuable to the UFC. I would argue that heavyweight is up there mostly because, you get big meaty men doing big meaty things and it's really easy for you to market it.
Yeah.
For the longest time, however, if your name isn't Amanda Nunes or Ronda Rousey, then the UFC seemingly cares less. The stats seem to uphold to that. The UFC seemingly cares a little bit less about the title around your waist. And then definitely for the lower weight class males, specifically Demetrius Johnson in his reign, the UFC, I think, cares a little bit less. We saw that they were
think that, sorry, I don't want to interrupt. With DJ in particular, and you brought him up, would you not think that, it was a way to kind of push DJ onto the market to try and make him maybe a little bit bigger because he wasn't a needle mover? Because I definitely agree with the idea of UFC kind of planning out these fights, maybe putting non-needle movers in, per se, as Dana White quoted it. I can see that. I don't like the fact that it's not a pay-per-view and they don't have the chance to make pay-per-view money too, but to throw it out there for more people to see, I'm not sure if that, to me, devalues the title. Okay, so continue. Sorry.
I'll just answer your question immediately. I think it depends on the way that you market it, right? Because if you say, let's say John Jones is fighting Daniel Cormier for the third time, right? Or the second time, whatever it is. And you say, sure, look, we are the co-main event. We're doing a double header, a double title shot pay-per-view card. We've got the monster, the needle mover, the John Jones, the DC, and underneath it, we have got the best 125-pound fighter you're ever going to see, and it's Demetrius Johnson versus, could be Manan. Doesn't fucking matter, right? It's the way you market it. To me, the UFC can slide that line, right? Of, well, what we're doing is we're getting it out so more eyes can see it. The way I think of it, and again, maybe this is my biased opinion, maybe it's incorrect, but the way I see it is we're looking at a fighter, or we're looking at the UFC saying, we only do big fights on pay-per-views, and generally, when we do fight night cards, what we do them for is for very strict reasons. Number one, contenders. We do them for, if somebody, a real serious prospect that we really want you to pay attention to is fighting, we'll put them at the main event of a fight night card. Or when guys retire and we want to give them a nice way to sort of saunter off into the distance, or a fight that is a massive fight, but isn't worthy of maybe title ramifications or divisional ramifications.
Sure.
Well,
yeah.
If we're saying that that's the stereotype, and then pay-per-view is the absolute best of the best, which is what it's always been sold as, why is there a title fight on this fight night? Not just a title fight either. A title fight with one of the greatest female fighters of all time, and I am completely in your boat, because at the end of the day, it doesn't matter. Valentina Shevchenko and Alexa Grasso are going to go out there and they're going to contend for 5 rounds, and it's a free card, and it's Mexican Independence Day, and the numbers will be absolutely gigantic, and I couldn't be happier for either of them. However, it just, to me, feels a little off.
100%. I get what you're saying. I honestly can't say that I feel the same, because I've not really seen too much proof to any of the vital fights, and I'm amazed how many there have been on free TV. I thought it would have been much less than that. So shout out Spence for that as well. So I think for me, we have no proof to say that, you know, any of the events that have previously taken place on free to air TV have devalued the title. I think we look at the heavyweight title pretty much the same as it is. I think it's based off the talent. I think how titles are looked really and champions are looked at is based off how, number one, how good they are. Number two is how good the division is. And the kind of contenders that are in that division per se. You know, we're hot on the heels of Israel losing, and we're always critical of Izzy and might not respect Izzy as we should, because the level of competition that he had to face might not have been as stringent as maybe the likes of what Jose Aldo had to face during his run up the division, or, you know, in the lightweight division when anyone has went on a run, or the featherweight, any of the divisions that you did mention. And it's interesting you say that. Like, my other question to this is, like, if you didn't want a title fight on this card and you wanted to celebrate Mexican Independence Day, what fight do you put in as the headliner?
It's tough, right? Because the answer is Yair Rodriguez, but he's fought too soon.
That would be number one. That would be number one. And maybe they were kind of hoping that for a different result against Volkanovski, but he might not have even been ready any which way. I think for the event that's in it, if this was just like some random throwaway UFC fight night card and they just decided to put a title fight under a really crappy undercard, I might have a little bit more of an opinion on that. But I think the fact that you're giving your Mexican champion the opportunity here in Alexa Grasso to come in on a very unique event. It'll be the first time I think the UFC have done something on a Mexican Independence Day. They're trying to make it a big deal. And she has an opportunity to go in there on a Mexican heavy card. Like you said, I think, yeah, that's a little bit of a kind of a criticism that they could have had it in Mexico. But, you know, she has a big opportunity, does Alexa Grasso, against the Valentina Shevchenko. You know, many consider her even though she made that mistake in the first fight, she's not the champion. She could be really the best woman fighter out there right now, and maybe Zhang Weili as well. Her and Zhang are really up there as the top two. But for Grasso, I think this is a good opportunity for her to kind of go in there and cement her status at the top of the 125-pound division, and also cement her status as an overall pound-for-pound fighter within the women's ranks as well. And, you know, I guess that conversation, we didn't really plan it at the start. You kind of sprung that on me, and I'm glad you did. But I think we'll get into the nuts and bolts of the fight itself. And look, we both watched back the last fight between Valentina Shevchenko and Alexa Grasso just today, and we have our opinions on it. And I mean, it was a very opportunistic win for Alexa Grasso looking back on it. A lot of talk of people maybe coming out of their prime or losing a step a little bit, and wasn't really necessarily the case for Valentina Shevchenko in the first fight. Look, there was a couple of chinks in her armor in previous fights. She had been run a little bit closely. When you're fighting these contenders, it is, you know, when you're fighting these contenders and you're winning, it's very hard to change anything up, you know. So maybe this was the result that she needed when she got choked out in the fourth round against Alexa Grasso and lost the title. You know, now is her chance. I think this will tell the true tale of Valentina Shevchenko coming in here in the main event on Saturday night, Harry.
So I think, as always, multiple things can be true, right? I do think that Valentina Shevchenko is declining from her prime, right? A woman that's been a lifelong martial artist, and a woman that in her age is just starting to get to roughly where you start to expect your body to slow down in terms of its athletic endeavors. And to be honest, I think she managed that really well in the first fight, because what Grasso did so well in the first round was she just used her speed against Shevchenko. She would dive into the pocket with 1-2s, and Shevchenko got caught with a couple of them, and that's where the little cut on the nose came from. And she then realized, okay, well, actually, my usual range, my usual cadence, which is usually very, and I don't mean this, you know, we're all massive Valentina Shevchenko fans, but she generally stands more flat-footed right? In that her heels are closer to the ground because she can drop them and land power shots quicker, right? That doesn't mean to say she's flat-footed and that she doesn't move her feet. That's not it at all. She's very, very movement-orientated and she moves very, very well. Her footwork's very, very good. But what she is so, so good at is catching people on the counter as they come in. But Grasso's speed, I think, took her a little bit by surprise in that first couple of minutes. And so Valentina did a great job of just taking a slight step out and then countering that external range a little bit better. In the second round, she just noticed that Alexa hadn't made any adaptations. She hadn't made any adjustments. She just kept trying the same thing. And so she ducked under, took her down, and we got to see the crucifix. Alexa Grasso managed to survive the crucifix, fair play. But there was a lot of good work down on the ground there. The third round, Valentina started very, very well. Alexa had, I think, tired Valentina a little bit, right? But it was a very competitive round, good round. The fourth round then, again, similar. Valentina landed well, landed good clean shots, and then the mistake, right? The back kick. Now, we've seen one of these before with Mr. Chris Weidman and Luke Rockhold, right? And we know what happened there. Thankfully, it wasn't as disastrous for Valentina's long-range brain health. But as you said, and you said it perfectly, it was an opportunistic back take. And when you give up your back in that scenario, it's not one of the back takes where if Grasso had shot in on a takedown, taken Valentina down and passed the guard, Valentina knew that she was going to be exposing her back by going to turtle and she's ready for the back take to come in, then you would expect her to be able to use her defensive mechanics to stop a choke happening, right? Because you're aware it's coming. If you throw a spinning back kick and all of a sudden a backpack just appears on you in the name of Alexa Grasso, it's panic stations. It's absolute panic stations. And by the time that Valentina had really started to gather her wits about her, a rear naked choke was in and she was on her knees and we were talking in absolute dire straits.
So can we focus on a couple of other things as well, on including the finish as well, and some of the difficulties that I kind of seen in that first fight for Valentina Shevchenko. And I think the first one is, you excellently put it, Valentina does like to stand flat-footed, but she also likes to control the distance and fight generally on the outside as well. And I don't think Alexa Grasso didn't allow her to do that. She wanted to insert herself in the pocket and she wanted to get off her boxing, and she's very quick, very powerful, and we saw that in the early stages. It was something that Valentina Shevchenko had to kind of constantly get used to in the first fight as well. By closing the distance, you're taking away the kicking game. And what Alexa Grasso, to me, what I felt that she did so excellently was she kind of drew Valentina into a kind of a straight boxing match, which really kind of suited Alexa Grasso's style. Now, we saw the odd kick, we saw the odd calf kick, the odd body kick, but not enough from Valentina, and not enough in terms of what she liked to do in previous fights, which opens up other kind of techniques for her on the feet and also opens up the takedown as well. We saw Valentina kind of actively struggle to deal with that, which kind of, number one, she was forced to work a little bit harder than maybe she was expecting to against Alexa Grasso, to kind of keep Alexa Grasso off her and to keep the range to a distance she wanted to, but also working when she took the fight down too, as Alexa Grasso accepted nothing in that first fight. And Valentina Shevchenko was probably used to fighting women in the past, maybe not so much Talia Santos, but who try, and then just survive and are happy to lose the decision to Valentina Shevchenko. I don't think Alexa Grasso was happy to do that, even though she was having some bad spells, even though she was getting taken down and frustrated. She still believed and she still kind of implemented the game plan and didn't get disheartened. And I thought, that mentality that she showed was, obviously why she went on to get the win, because she didn't give up, she didn't get disheartened, and I thought that was a good trait that she had. I also think that Alexa Grasso, is kind of deceivingly strong, and her frame is so big. Like, looking back at that fight, Harry, today, the frame of Alexa Grasso, even though Valentina seems a little bit taller, but it was Alexa Grasso's frame and her apparent strength, I feel, cause Valentina Shevchenko problems in that first fight as well, would you think?
Yeah, I think it was. So the kicking game I thought was really interesting, and I was going to get to that in terms of the next fight, right?
The next fight, yeah.
I was questioning why we didn't see more teeps, right? We saw the efficacy of Sean Strickland's teeps against Israel Adesanya, right? Well, it works the other way too. You know, if you're Sean Strickland, you're teeping Israel Adesanya back behind the tram line to make sure that he doesn't come to the center cage where he's uber dangerous. Fine. If I'm Valentina Shevchenko and I would like more center cage, and I know that Alexa Grasso is going to be jumping in at me with her 1-2s and her left hooks, chuck a teep in there. It's not like Valentina's teep isn't absolutely fantastic, because it is. And so I was a little bit, what's the right word? Like, I was a bit perplexed as to why we didn't see more teeps from Valentina. But in terms of the power, I don't think it was necessarily the clinch exchanges or the ground exchanges where Valentina not feared, but was defensively aware of the strength. It was absolutely when it was in the first round, she got clipped with a right hand, and you could see her face was like, what the fuck was that? And it's not often that you see Valentina clipped one, but clipped clean and gets a visible reaction, even less that you see that happen. And
100%.
so I think it was at that moment I was scoring the fight to Valentina in that first round, scoring the round for Valentina, and then that shot lands, and I'm like, ooh, that changes everything in this round.
It does, yeah. And that we've talked about, you know, being more impactful with your strikes is going to win you the round. And I think I would have scored round 1 for Alexa Grasso because of that as well. Round 2, I think Valentina made some nice adjustments and brought in the takedown, although there was no setups. I think that's another thing we'll kind of maybe look ahead and think, you know, Valentina needs to kind of maybe set up her takedowns in the rematch. With some strikes, she needs to kind of maybe distance control a little bit better. But to go back, round 2, round 3 for me were Valentina Shevchenko's as well. And to be honest, round 4 was heading in her direction too until she drew that spinning back kick. And I thought, you know, she chose to throw the spinning back kick there when she probably should have took your advice, Harry, and teeped, and ultimately had her back taken. Talk to me real quick about that back take, the control of the leg before she got down onto her back. It was unbelievable. And, you know, looking back at it, I don't know whether it's in her nominations for submission of the year, but it should be.
It should be. Yeah. I mean, even regardless of how we get to the eventual finish and whatever, for Alexa Grasso to be able to transition from seeing Valentina begin to rotate for a back kick before we even see that that's coming, for her to be aware and for her to then make the adjustment to keep the inside space and to find herself a lat wrap to start to bring herself up and around is unbelievable stuff. Like, we only see that. I say we only see that. Alexander Pantoja is famous for those types of back takes where he just wraps around his opponent like a snake real quick. But to see Alexa Grasso do it, and to do it in the way that she did, was just unbelievable. Just the speed, the spatial awareness, the balls to try it, right? The confidence to go for it. It's not like that's something that you just drill. Like, that's something that happens in the moment. You see it and you take it. And by
100%, absolutely, totally natural response there, where it was like, and maybe to Alexa Grasso's and her team's credit, maybe it was something that she was trying to do to counter the spinning attacks of Valentina, because Valentina does like her spinning attacks. She does throw them almost every fight one way or another. But adjustments is what both women are going to have to bring in here. Even though Alexa Grasso was got the win and there's some holes there that can be exposed. Likewise for Valentina Shevchenko. It might sound a little bit strange, but it's very rare you come in. This is my mentality anyway. I feel Alexa Grasso needs to kind of shore up a lot more of her side of things as the champion than the challenger does here. And normally it's the other way around, is what does the challenger have to do to take the belt off the champion? But Alexa Grasso got taken down far too easily. And if Valentina Shevchenko does try and set those up a little bit better and those takedowns are there, it could be a much longer night for her on the rematch. Do you think that is the number one key thing for Alexa Grasso here? Is and look at, we saw a takedown, we saw her stop the takedown in round 4 before she got the finish as well. So, that was a little bit maybe true to the detriment of the cardio tank of Valentina at that stage. But, what do you think would be the number one thing that needs to be adjusted with, let's say, with both of these women? And you can start with Alexa Grasso first.
Absolutely. So I actually think the takedown defense is not actually the problem. I mean, it's the product of the problem, but it's not the actual problem. The problem for me is Alexa doesn't set up her blitzes into the pocket. She's on the outside, and then she bounds into the pocket, throwing her lancing 1-2. And in the first round, we saw how accurate it was, and we saw how useful it was. But then in the second round, Valentina said, yeah, no problem. I'll just duck onto this because I can see it coming from a mile away, because now you're just doing the same thing. And whilst I agree entirely that Valentina could do a better job of setting up those takedowns, it feels as though that bounding in 1-2 is an inherent part of the Grasso game. That's a problem, right? That's a problem. So that's the thing that I would change if I was in Grasso's corner. I would start by coming up with just a couple of different looks before I get into the pocket. It doesn't
maybe starting with a jab. Like, it's very rare that you have seen in that first fight, or in general with Alexa Grasso, that she kind of started her combinations with a jab or even finished with a jab. And I think that kind of will put her in range where she can get off her big shots rather than battering in. I was kind of looking at all the way, and I totally agree with what you're saying about Alexa rushing in a little bit too much with her combinations. That can be countered with a takedown, can be countered with just a fucking step to the side and an overhand right as well, which she doesn't want to happen. But a simple jab there to find yourself in range and to also give Valentina Shevchenko something to think about as well. Would you agree?
100% agree. But I think the potential problem, right, is the thing that gave her all the efficacy and landed the damage on Valentina Shevchenko also was the reason why Valentina began to win the fight. And this is where adjustments are imperative. So that's why I'd like to see Alexa have a couple of different looks. As you say, start with a jab. Start by going to the body. Start by just throwing a low kick. Start by angling off before you shoot in. Start by giving her lots of different looks before you bound in with what was a great combination. A really nice 1-2, clean down the pipe, landed really well. Grand. I need to see something else though, because if we don't see anything else, and instead Alexa opts for a single adjustment, just starting with a jab, Valentina's going to make that read, make an adjustment, and she's going to eat her alive, right? So I don't want her to move away from using those explosions into the pocket. Far from it. I just need them to be a little bit more mature. Now, the thing that I really liked in Grasso's game was, as you've already said, her lack of willingness to accept bad positions. That's great. Keep that. No problem. I just need to see the maturity on the feet, because the crowding was good, right? As you've already said, you've already mentioned, the cutting and shutting down of the kicking game of Valentina was good, because that puts Valentina under pressure in terms of the range battles. I just need to see that you can punish Valentina a little bit more with some variety. I think for Valentina on the opposite side, it's pretty much a rinse and repeat. I would like
that was my next question. I was going to ask, with Valentina, when you're a fighter who was winning until you made a mistake, really, obviously she had, at the time, she didn't win round 1, but she made the adjustments in round 2 and round 3, and the kind of arch of the fight was kind of playing out until that spinning attack.
Mm-hmm.
There's not really too much that Valentina needs to do here. Maybe more so, rather than choosing those spinning attacks more simply, a teep for distance, maybe trying for her to establish her jab as well, because if Valentina well establishes her jab, a jab could be something that Alexa Grasso might run straight into too if she hasn't polished up her striking coming into the pocket. But like you said, Harry, basically rinse and repeat here for Valentina Shevchenko.
Pretty much. Yeah, pretty much. I mean, as you already alluded to, and I agree, we have to expect that in the Valentina camp, we have to expect that Grasso's going to make adjustments, right? We have to expect that she's going to come in more mature than she did in the last one. And so it would be foolhardy to think that we can just duck under a jab 1-2 and find our way to the hips, right? So if I'm Valentina, I'm probably thinking, okay, well, there's going to be some maturity, so I'm going to need to make some reads. If there's going to be some maturity, it's going to allow me more time to work on the kicking game. It's going to allow me more time to bring the body kicks in, because some of the body kicks were crushing, right? Some excellent body kicks directly to the ribs, really lovely stuff, as we expect from Valentina. If I'm Valentina, I'm going to invest in some low leg kicks. I'm going to invest in some chopping at the ankle. I'm going to invest in showing her a high kick. I'm going to invest in jabs to the body, hooks to the body, rights to the body. And then as and when the time comes, if Alexa still wants to bound in, we know that Valentina's got some really excellent trips from the clinch. And we also know, because we saw, she has a really nice level change and some really nice takedowns. When it hit the ground, as much as Alexa was fighting and fighting well, there was a vast class difference. Valentina was just absolutely marauding through the Grasso guard as if it wasn't really there. And we got to dominant positions very, very, very quickly. And she was able to maintain them for significant portions of the round. And so I think for Valentina, the maturity comes in just making reads. So if I was in the Valentina camp, I would be focusing on making as many reads with as many different looks from as many different strikers as possible and maintaining a game plan that is MMA centric, because Valentina is in a situation where she knew she was winning on the feet. She knew that she'd made some correct reads and some good adjustments in the fight, and she knew that she was winning on the ground. And okay, you're absolutely right. There needs to be a far, far, far stricter adherence to range control and when you spin and when you don't spin, because you mentioned she throws a spinning attack every time. Her first strike in the very first round was a spinning back fist, right?
Yeah.
And so yes, she loves the spinning attack. I would like to see, even if it's just for this fight, Valentina pick the spots far, far, far better, because a spinning attack is an amazing thing to cut off the cage. It's an amazing thing to generate power, but it's not an amazing thing when you're the one under pressure. And so that lapse in fight IQ cost her the biggest thing in the sport, which is her title. I don't necessarily expect to see it again from Valentina. But sure, look, we said that about Israel Adesanya and Sean Strickland, right? And look what happened there.
Or as we say, the preview show, we're in the world of the unknowns, and that's why it's exciting to see what's going to happen on Saturday night. That, to me, there's not too much more that I can add. I feel, if I was going to make a pick, I don't mind making picks, but like I feel maybe Shevchenko has the less adjustments to make, and I think looking back at the fight, it was an error. I think if she is a little bit more patient and a little bit more composed and makes the right reads, I think she can get the job done, and we could be heading on a one-way road to a trilogy fight here. And like I said, we're in the weird, mad world of mixed martial arts, and anything can happen. And speaking of weird and speaking of mad, Kevin Holland is in the co-main event, Harry. He takes on Della Maddalena in the welterweight division, a fight that I enjoyed. I like it on paper. We had a little bit of an over and back just on the WhatsApp group when it was announced, because you feel that this might not necessarily be the test that you would have wanted to see Della Maddalena in on his rise up the welterweight rankings.
I still think that maybe I am mental. Maybe I'm mental, right? But the way that
you're not totally wrong. There's a different level of circumstances that I think coming into this fight, but you go ahead, please, first.
I just don't know if I can trust Kevin Holland yet, is really where I'm at.
That's kind of mine. I am kind of trusting him a little bit in this fight to turn up, because I think if he does turn up, this is going to be a very interesting fight. If he does turn up,
could not agree. But I'm just pulling up his record here now, right? So, okay, you lose to Khamzat Chimaev, whatever, dude. You took it on like 35 minutes notice. It's fine, no stress, whatever. You lose to Stephen Thompson, because you go out and you want to act the bollocks against Stephen Thompson and Stephen Thompson breaks your fucking arm, right? You're an idiot. I don't know what more to tell you. You know, the blueprint to beating Stephen Thompson is obvious. You take him down and you grind him. Grand. Now, okay, it's not easy to take Stephen Thompson down at the best of times. I'm not saying it is, but you take him down and you fucking grind him. That's the way you beat him. Santiago Ponzinibbio is a good performance, but I think at this point in Santiago Ponzinibbio's career, we kind of know where we are. He never quite got to the maximal potential.
It was a potential banana skin peel for Kevin Holland, but he didn't slip on it that time.
No, he did not. Absolutely not. Couldn't agree more. Now, the Michael Chiesa finish, we can argue until the cows come home about who Michael Chiesa is now.
I'm not going to argue at all. I thought that he was a guy that did not want to be in there at all. I don't mean to devalue Kevin Holland's win there, but it does devalue Kevin Holland's win because the demeanor of Michael Chiesa in that fight was not good. It did not look good. It did not look like he wanted to be in there. But you know what? Kevin Holland got the job done, and he got it done inside round 1. He did what you needed to do against an opponent like that. But we have these asterisks, Harry, don't we? This is kind of the thing that follows Kevin Holland around each and every fight that we talk about him in. It's that asterisk there. And but he is going to be in with a guy that wants to be in there. He's going to be in there with a hungry guy, and he's going to be in there with a very talented fighter in Jack Della Maddalena on Saturday night. And there ain't going to be nowhere to hide for Kevin Holland. He's going to have to either put up or shut up.
Right. And I think this, let's have a conversation as if a fully fledged, fully in, fully ready Kevin Holland turns up, right? Then this is a fight for Jack Della Maddalena where he's fighting an absolute menace of a man. Kevin Holland is long, he's rangy, he hits hard, he fights from awkward angles, he can wrestle a bit, he's got weird stuff on the ground, he throws elbows from weird places on the ground, he talks to you all the time, he wants to get in your head, he gets in your face, doesn't mind taking a shot to give one. It's just a dirty, gritty, grimy, horrible style of matchup. Like, we talk all the time about there are some guys that are martial artists. They want to go in and they say, look, I've trained a specific set of techniques for a specific amount of time, and I would like to see if in a fully fledged combat situation, whether they work. And if the answer is yes, great, no problem. That's a positive result. There are some guys who are athletes and they see this as an athletic endeavor. I'd say Bo Nickel is similar to that, right? Tyron Woodley is similar to that. And then you have Kevin Hollands and Robbie Lawlers and these sorts of people who are just fucking fighters. They are fighters. Tim Means, another one. Johnny Hendricks, another one, right? They're just fighters. Nate Diaz, fighters. Conor McGregor, half fighter, half athlete, half martial artist, right? But
guys that, when you say by fighters, is guys that are willing to bite down on their gum shield and are willing to kind of go into the trenches and pull victory out of the jaws of defeat. And you talk about Jack Della Maddalena that way, but we have some worries about Kevin Holland on the other end. For me, I think with Kevin Holland, he could turn up here fully prepared and fully ready to take on Jack Della Maddalena at the start of the contest on Saturday night. But Jack Della Maddalena is going to be looking to go out there and take that away from him. And we have seen lapses, whatever skill set that Kevin Holland has inside the octagon. And when he is on, it's a very, very astute set of skills that he brings in there. But you need to have a strong mental game to flourish at those skills or to kind of portray those skills the way you want to portray them. And we've seen lapses of concentration. We've seen mental breaks from Kevin Holland in there before. And that might be his escape route. That might be his excuse. You know, that might be a little bit of touch of self-sabotage, right? And we base our judgment based off previous performances of Kevin Holland. But this is a fight where he can throw all of those opinions out of the window if he goes out there and beats Jack Della Maddalena. It's a really, really proven fight for Kevin Holland and where he's at in his career.
And it's interesting, right? Because sort of stereotypically, this is the fight for Jack Della Maddalena to burst him into the rankings, and he can now start calling for the fighters that they're going to get him closer to a title shot and all of this stuff. And, you know, this is the type of fight that that he would have been looking for the last couple of performances. But we're talking more about proving for Kevin Holland here than we are about Jack Della Maddalena. And that's the really interesting part of this, because you are right. I have not yet seen a mental break from Jack Della Maddalena. That's not to say that he can't be broken. That's not to say that he won't be broken inside that octagon. I just haven't seen it yet. And therefore, I have no evidence to suggest that it can exist or will exist. However, as you say, I have 110% seen those from Kevin Holland, and it usually comes when he's being the nail. And Jack Della Maddalena, we have seen him be the nail, and we've seen him come out the other side. We have seen him make mistakes against Ramzan Ameev, and we have seen him fight his way out of pretty horrendous DAS situations and come out the other side. I have not yet seen Kevin Holland find a way, without acting the bollocks, to find himself in a winning position after being in a really, really tough position. And so I think regardless of who we think is going to turn up and who we don't think is going to turn up, the really interesting thing is let's see what happens when both of them walk back to their corners after the first 5 minutes. Then we'll know.
Yeah, we sure will. And I hope Kevin Holland shows up, because it's going to be a really, really good fight if he does. A little bit of criticism around JDM's last performance, Harry, but it does come. We were talking about asterisks in this fight. That last performance does come with an asterisk, because Jack Della Maddalena basically cut weight 3 times for that, and the fight was up in the air. So while we noted, we don't really bear too much relevance on the progression of Jack Della Maddalena. That was a super strange situation that he found himself in, but proving once again, when he went in there having, fights on, fights off, and having cut weight, he went in there against Basile Chavez and he found a way to get the job done, even though it was a split decision. And other fighters have been in that position before and they haven't found a way. So, you've got to take the mini positives there, but it wouldn't be anything that would worry me all that much going into this fight, Harry. Would it worry you at all?
No, I mean, the other side is we don't actually know how good Basile Chavez is, right?
True.
He could come out in his next fight and absolutely fucking obliterate some fellas. And that split decision in 3 years could look unbelievable. Like, we just don't know. It's one of those situations that context really, really matters. And for the most part, right, it's not going to matter, because nobody's going to go back and look at Jack Della Maddalena's career if he wins the title and be like, well, he was a split decision to Basile Chavez, so clearly he's fucking garbage, Like, nobody's going to do that. Everyone is going to not remember the context. They will just see a win on the record and say, sure, look, he won. Nothing matters. And to be fair, they're right, because he did go out, he did get the job done, and he did manage to get his hand raised. And I think, to your point, it's something that we should talk about a little bit more, is that when the going gets tough, you've cut weight 3 times, short notice opponent, change after change after change after change, and you still manage to find a way to go out there and get the job done, you should be celebrated for that. That is absolutely something that you should be celebrated for, because these things are difficult. Going through an 8-week fight camp with one opponent in mind, setting a game plan, traveling to the other side of the world, cutting weight and fighting that person is fucking hard. Let alone doing it, taking time away from your family, not traveling back, staying in the country, keeping your weight low, cutting weight again, being told you're going to fight, not fighting, still staying in the country, still staying away from your family, then being like, oh, no, you're going to fight now, and then it fails again, and then you go through the whole thing again, you finally fight a guy on a couple of days' notice. Like, that's an absolute fucking shambles for Jack Della Maddalena, and he still goes in, and he still gets his hand raised. And so I think, to the point of us saying Kevin Holland is somebody that we have seen break, and this is what I mean with Jack Della Maddalena. I've not seen any evidence that he's going to break. Going in and having a tough fight against an unknown quantity in Basile Chavez and grinding out a win after the context, if anything, gives me more confidence of his abilities.
Absolutely. Very well said. And evidence is what we were looking for in the next fight as well, of how well Rahul Rosas Jr. has progressed in his early career. We saw a few chinks in the armor when he was last in there competing. Harry picked up a loss to the very good Christian Rodriguez. He faces Terrence Mitchell now, 14-3 coming in here as well. And I mean, not too much to talk about in this fight. It's a very young green fighter, a very young at a very young age, and Rosas Jr. coming in there with the against a more experienced opponent and a guy who's coming off the back of a loss himself against Cameron Simon, who is also a very good fighter. So, what are you hoping to see from Raul Rosas Jr. and Terence Mitchell in this fight?
Just improvements from Raul Rosas Jr. Like, I think the UFC are being very smart here. They know what they have on their hands potentially, and they know that it's something that they need to nurture. They know that they have a potential, even if he doesn't make a title, even if he doesn't make a champion, they have a potential Mexican star on their hands because his fighting style is that of a fan favorite. And if he's in the UFC long enough, he'll cultivate a following in his home country and in the United States of America. And so because he becomes a very, very valuable asset in terms of placement on cards and name value and all of this sort of stuff, right? So for the next 5 fights, I see no reason why we don't keep Raul Rosas Jr. right here. Forget the I want to beat John Jones's thing to the title. Everyone, just listen to what I'm about to say. Yeah. It's not happening, lads. Forget it. Just fucking forget it. It is not important for you to beat John Jones's record. What's important is for you to become the best fighter as quickly but as safely as possible. And so for Raul Rosas Jr., if I don't see him fight anyone decent until he's 22, 23, I have absolutely no problem with that whatsoever. Let the man build, let the man grow. And I think in this fight against Terence Mitchell, we saw the performance against Cameron Simon, and we know where the holes are. And so for Raul Rosas Jr., this is one of the have you improved tests. Because if he has, he'll go out and he'll win this fight, however he wants to win it, right? Whether he finds a submission, whether he finds a finish, doesn't really matter. If he goes out and banks 15 minutes, remember, one of the things we were saying with Ian Garry not so long ago is actually how proud we are now, looking back at it in hindsight, that in those initial couple of fights, he took his time completely. He didn't search for finishes. He just went out there under the bright lights and got as many minutes as absolutely possible. And then he goes out and absolutely decimates Neil Magny over 3 rounds. And we're like, fuck me, this guy's going all the way. And so for Raul Rosas Jr., I would actually look at somebody like Ian Garry and I would say, look, sure, this guy's doing it correctly. Let me take a leaf out of his book. Let me try and keep my name as low as possible for as long as possible until I'm in a position where I think my skills are as at the same level, if not higher than my potential brand value. And then we'll start cooking.
And Raul's development as well, Harry, is also the responsibility of his team and the UFCs as well. With all due respect to Raul Rosas Jr., he's still a kid. He's 18 years of age. He's going to have the world at his feet. He does have the world at his feet in his own opinion, I guess. And he's going to want to take on everybody. He's going to want to take on the world. But he needs to be nurtured by UFC. He needs to be nurtured by the team. And he needs to pick the right tests at the right time. I think on paper, this is the right test at the right time for Raul Rosas Jr. Still an experienced guy that he's going in against, but I'm very excited to see how he responds after that first loss. It's what I say always on the preview show. Really excited to see. I'm excited to see guys and women come back after losses just to see what kind of improvements they have made. What another guy I'm really looking forward to seeing is Daniel Zellhuber in the next fight against Christos Giagos in the lightweight division. Went out there and impressed in his last fight, did Zellhuber. He picked up a win over Lando Venata. Been a mixed bag for him since coming over from the Contender Series. I think, we saw the true kind of fighter that he is in the last fight, but still needs to improve in certain areas as well. Obviously, coming in here at 13-1, this is another good opportunity to get a win for Zellhuber against Giagos. Would you agree?
Yeah, I mean, Giagos at 33, having faced the tests that he's faced, I think we kind of know where the ceiling is for him. Obviously, there's absolutely no shame whatsoever in losing to an Arman Tsarukyan or a Thiago Moises, right? There's absolutely no shame in that whatsoever, but it tells us sort of where he is. And he's had a storied career at this point. A really, really good winning over Ricky Glenn, but this is what I mean, right? That's sort of the level is those wins over Ricky Glenn. And so if Zellhuber comes in here and can come anywhere near close to the performance that he put in against Lando Venata, who, even in his position in his career, I think we all still know the potential of Lando Venata on any given night. So that was an impressive win for me. But yeah, I think this is one of those things where a lot of these fights, the Mexican fighters have the A side here, right? Because the UFC are trying to architect a card where on Independence Day, the Mexicans are there and they're wearing their hats and they're having a great time, and all the Mexican fighters win, and then it's a great day for everyone, right? So, yeah, I suspect
You go back and look at the names that Giagos has been in. He's been in and around the UFC for a minute. Made his UFC debut at UFC 179 in a debut against Gilbert Burns. Lost that fight. Other losses to Chris Wade. He's been doing his thing over at PFL. Josh Emmett just fought for a title. Lost to exited the UFC actually for that Josh Emmett fight. Picked up another couple of wins. Came back in and lost. Oh man, UFC don't like this guy when making these. His second debut was against Charles Oliveira. Lost that. Lost to Drakkar Close, to Saryukin and Thiago Moises. This guy doesn't lose to bums. He loses to good fighters, and I think this fight is more maybe of a kind of a fight to see where Daniel Zellhuber is and how far maybe he can go in his career, more so than Giagos, who's coming in to fight his 31st fight. Is crazy. He's been around a while, but at 33, like you said, Harry, is battle worn at this stage of his career, but has the ability to turn this into an exciting fight. Opening fight on the card is Fernando Padilla versus my fellow countryman Kyle Nelson. How do you see this one going down, Harry?
It's probably a barn burner, this one. Probably is a barn burner.
Good fight to open up the card.
The way that Padilla put Julian Erosa out, he put him all the way to the pit of the shadow realm with that right hook. He looked fantastic. An absolutely gigantic frame in terms of length and reach for this type of division. Big, long, Langley fucker. Kyle Nelson, a bit more staunch in himself. Obviously he's been up in Canada. He's been brave in the colds. He's got a bit more meat on him, that fella, but hits hard, sits down on his punches, but is hittable. And so this is one of those fights where they are coming out and they're expecting fireworks from both guys, I suspect.
Yeah, absolutely. Good fight and smart matchmaking to kick off the card. On the opening fight of the prelims, another decent fight too in the women's 115-pound division. A big fan of Lupi Godinez. She comes in to take on Elise Reed. Obviously, we've seen Lupi Godinez out there the last time, took on Emily Ducoit. Got a good unanimous decision win, looked comfortable there. We saw Elise Reed last time out, picking up a win against Xinyu Frey. This is a good fight, Harry. I'm excited for this, and a good opportunity for Lupi Godinez, to kind of put a run together in 115-pound division. It's kind of, the second chance for her, obviously, after she dropped that fight to Angela Hill a couple of fights back, has since picked up good wins over Cynthia Calvillo, and obviously Emily Ducoit in her last fight. How are we feeling about this one?
Lupi Godinez needs to finish this fight. Is my feeling here. I think that the ceiling for Lupi Godinez is so much higher than Elise Reed, who is a good fighter, gritty fighter, tough fighter, well put together fighter, but isn't somebody that we're talking about as having a potential of challenging for a title. What I don't understand about Lupi Godinez is some of her decision-making in fights. In the Sylvia Calvillo fight, she didn't try and take the fight to the mat once. She just tried to stand and bang with somebody who, has some wrestling in Calvillo, but nowhere near the caliber of wrestling of Lupi Godinez. And equally, Cynthia Calvillo loves fighting on the inside pockets. She's quite a small lady, and yet Lupi was just happy to stand and bang with her for some reason and make it a far, far, far closer fight than it needed to be. Same with Emily Ducoit. There was a bit more mixed martial arts there, but just not enough for my liking, given the caliber of wrestling that Lupi has. Now, I will make the concession that we could be looking at Lupi saying, look, I'm going to go out here and I'm going to make sure I am working on my hands, knowing that if it really gets rough, I'll just out wrestle these ladies and it's fine. But that is a dangerous game to play. The interesting thought on this fight is, to me, it's a slight regression in terms of caliber of fighter. Elise Reed, somebody that will grapple, that will wrestle, that is happy to do so. And I wonder whether this is one of those performances where Lupi Godinez is going to be forced to grapple. And if she does, we're going to see some beautiful things because she's a fantastic grappler. But it could also be a chance for Lupi Godinez to stuff takedowns and really show off the improvements of her hands. So I think all in all, this is a fight that Lupi Godinez is in there
and has the potential. Oh, Jesus, I've murdered this sentence, so I'm just going to start again. This is Lupa Godinez's fight to lose, right? And so I hope she goes out and I hope she puts on a performance that then she can jump on a mic and call an interesting name.
Yeah, a developmental, winnable fight there for Lupi Godinez. I definitely agree with that. Roman Kopylov has put together a pretty impressive win streak over the last little while, Harry. Coming in here with 3 finishes over Alessio De Cerico, Ponahele Soriano, and Claudio Ribeiro. Coming in this time on Saturday night against Josh Fremd. I'm excited to see Kopylov based off the last previous performances that we've seen in there. Obviously, Josh Fremd coming in there after a good win streak as well. Cedricus Dumas and Jamie Pickett are 2 wins that he got in his last 3 fights. Obviously, lost to Tresean Gore, but this is Roman Kopylov's fight to lose all day.
Yeah, I'm not sold on Kopylov at all. I won't lie to you. Kopylov has 1 shot and it's a left high kick, and it's as if you're playing Tekken and you only know one thing, and he just spams it over and over again. Josh Fremd is not a good fighter. Wins over Cedric Dumas is nothing to write home about. Wins over Jamie Pickett. Jamie Pickett's not even a fighter, like horrendous stuff. And so Kopylov would probably go out here and probably head kick Josh Fremd into Rosed. I would not be shocked if he did. But I don't think it's going to teach us anything about Kopylov. If Kopylov comes out here and shows interesting new wrinkles to his game, maybe shows us a little bit more of the grappling acumen that he has, maybe shows us a little bit more setups to that high kick, fine, I'll listen, no problem. But I need to see if Kopylov goes out and gets the W here and gets it in impressive fashion. I need Kopylov in with a real test.
Yeah, I agree. Winnable fight. Look, at running through, I want to stop and I want to talk about Tracy Cortez versus Jasmine Jasudavicius.
Yep.
Let's mention the rest of the fighters on the card. That's Edgar Chairez taking on Daniel Lacerda. Could be a good fight, 125-pound division. Charlie Camp, that might be fighting night. It's pretty good. Any quick thoughts on that, Joanna?
Daniel Lacerda is an absolutely mad bastard, and he goes out there and he blows his gas tanking around and gets finished. That's just what he does. So if he can go out and if he can finish Chairez, early, then grand. But Chairez looked good against Tatsuto Taira. Chairez, he's one of those guys that jumps gillies, and so I already hate him, obviously. No. But got a really nice jab, really, really well-educated jab, really nice right hand, good check left hook. On the feet, he's a good, solid fighter. He pushed Taira on the feet pretty extensively until Taira decided to start taking him down, and then he jumped gillies and, whatever. What do you want me to say? But Lacerda is a guy that will happily stand and bang on the feet, and this is 4 straight losses already for Lacerda, so it was very much a Chairez, please take this Tatsuto Taira fight, and then we'll reward you, and this is the reward. But Lacerda comes out, starts fast, hits hard. I think Chairez decimates him inside a couple of rounds, and it'll probably be a viral knockout, but look, here we are. It'll be fun.
Absolutely. We'll stop a little bit and talk a little bit about Tracy Cortez versus Jasmine Jasudavicius. I got it right the first time. I shouldn't have chanced it the second time. But it's been the first time we've seen Tracy Cortez in quite some time. Hasn't fought since March, or quite some time. I mean, she was fighting last May, but it's almost a year and a bit out of the cage for her. Jasmine has been in there. She's been picking up some good wins, and this is a pretty good fight on the undercard, Harry. I would say myself.
Really, really, really like this fight. Fantastic matchup. Tracy Cortez is one of those fighters that we have absolutely no idea as to what her ceiling is, really. Obviously, some really, really nice grappling acumen, and she was looking like she was putting things together on the feet in her last couple of performances. A year out, what's she done? Has she gone away? Has she been training? Has she been improving her hands? Has she been improving everything? If the answer is yes, then we know that Jasmine Jasudavicius can do a little bit of everything. Very well-rounded fighter. And one of these, whoever wins this, I think has a really, really interesting next matchup. The only complaint I have about this fight is the placement on the card. I understand one's Canadian and one's American, and so this doesn't fit the bill of what you want, but this is 100% a fight that deserves to be on a main card. 1,000,000%.
Yeah. 100%. I couldn't agree more. I couldn't agree more with that. Very excited to see that. For Jasmine, this is kind of a shit or get off the pot kind of a fight for her. She's got to be beating Cortez, 34 years of age. She will get the push if she beats someone like Cortez. Obviously, You know, Cortez was in a fine reign of form before she kind of took that spell away. And I'm calling it a spell away as if she was out for 2 or 3 years. But, you know, sometimes that amount of time out can be detrimental. But it'll be interesting to see how she does against Jazzy J. That's what I'm going to call her. In that fight on the prelims. To round off the card, Charlie Campbell, Alex Reyes in the lightweight division. And just so as it happens, Josephine Knudsen, who didn't quite have it 2 weeks ago, seemingly has just woke up and she suddenly has it now. She's opening up the card against Marnik Man. That's crazy the way that happened for her. I mean, Dana White all but belittled her on Dana White's Contender Series a couple of weeks back, saying even though she won her fight, she wasn't quite good enough. But now she's suddenly there, and fair play to her. I'm happy that she did get the opportunity because, you know, it was harsh enough by Dana White. She does have a lot to work on. I do have to say that from looking at that fight on the Contender Series. But, you know, at 6-0, fighters will have things to work on. But I'm glad she got her opportunity inside the UFC. It was a tough one for her. To get a win on the Contender Series and not get a contract in this day and age is quite unusual. Harry, I'm going to send it over to you for your final thoughts before we wrap it up.
Viva la Mexico. I'm not sure that the Mexican fans are going to get what they want in the main event. Obviously, I'm not making a pick there. We're not going to do that anymore. But if the first fight was anything to go by, then Valentina should perform to a similar clip in this fight. And other than that, it's a really good card. Like, it's a really good card. I have no complaints about it whatsoever. Some mixed. Lots and lots of mixes of what we're looking for, right? We've got a really amazing fight at the top. We've got some divisional movements in some of the fights. We've got budding prospects. We've got old veterans against newer guys looking to prove themselves. Yeah, I'm happy with this card. Very, very, very nice card to watch. Very, very good stuff.
As am I. You can catch it for free on Saturday from the T-Mobile Arena in Las Vegas. We hope that you enjoy the card. Harry and I will be back to discuss all of that in the balance breakdown next week. Follow him at BJJ_Harry Powell and myself, I O'Neill MMA. And until then, adios, amigos.